So it was twilight on the 4th of July, 2004. Our love has definitely changed from the time when we first met. It was very much so kind of hot and heavy, very passionate love as teens would, characteristic of teens, I should say.
Right.
But as time went on, it changed because I would say more so into a very unconditional love, because there are things that we have done in our past separately and together that we've had to forgive each other for.
We've been fighting for rights for a long time, and just finally hearing a couple months ago that now, same-sex marriages is recognized everywhere. So it's like, oh my God, we actually are still in our 20s and it happened. We traveled from Texas to DC to get married. So it's like, why should my love be frowned upon because it's with the same sex?
There's a voice on campus in the community that I've seen, but that voice comes mainly from white gay males. So I feel like the story is not being told, or not being told to its fullness.
I think a lot of people only assume that everybody who's LGBT on this campus is fine because we're known as an LGBT affirming place. So I think from folks outside of the community and even from folks inside the community, there's this kind of misinformation about how people are seeing themselves and how people are finding community, and that everything's okay.
I think to some extent people are accepting of the orientations. So if you have a friend and they turn out to be gay and that means they hold hands with somebody of the same gender and kiss them, I think people are mostly understanding and accepting of that. What I don't think people totally understand is the activism side. And so people don't like to talk about trans women of color being murdered by police and topics like that that are much heavier. And they would rather talk about, partying with gay guys or going to a gay bar.
Some folks on this campus, don't see the value in kind of laying out pronouns to begin with, or don't see why, what the big deal is. So I think that's one thing. So I know students who are misgendered, or when they say their pronouns, people are either confused or don't say them. What I would consider the typical derogatory words towards LGBT people, using queer in a negative way, I think are still happening, whether it's written on a whiteboard or, said out loud.
But two women that dress feminine should not have been together, and it was referred to in the derogatory sense as dyking.
We primarily sit on panels in classrooms on the Rainbow Speakers Bureau. So we go into mainly 100 and 200 level classes and talk to students about integrating LGBTQ identities and stories into their curriculum.
Even when there's just white people on the panel, they talk about privilege and how their white privilege comes into play with these panels. But I think it's important to bring race into conversations, because in society, and you just see a lot of issues, especially with queer and trans people of color. There's a lot of violence, persecution, prejudice surrounding queer and trans people of color.
We also have queer talks, which are basically us sitting around and having discussions and dialogues on various topics such as religion and the LGBTQ community, or going home for the holidays and not being out to your parents.
So sometimes there's just a lot more inquisitive questions, which, people who identify that way don't want to always answer those questions. They're like, I just want you to call me my name and use my pronouns. Can we go get some food?
I think there's a really promising student power kind of assembling on campus in a lot of different regards, but specifically for LGBTQ activism, I think that we are definitely understanding where we are failing in terms of our intersectionality.
AU is more inclusive than any other campus that I've been on. Things are very normal It normalizes our life to be on the AU campus, and that's something that I always will appreciate.
We're really creating some strides, but we have so much more to do that I think it's going to be really interesting to see how we accomplish it in the next few years.